First question comes from Asmatov. How big of a leap are the Pistons taking from last season? Also, how cooked are the Bucks? Well, in terms of the Pistons, I mean, big is sort of like the leap they're taking. It's kind of relative, right? Because they're still a bottom third in offense. They actually do have the 15th ranked defense, and they're only 3-5, which doesn't sound that impressive in any sense of the word. But then when you consider that they didn't get their third win last year until December 30th, then you're like, oh wow, they're actually taking big steps, and it helps to have a coach who is seemingly upgrading the way things are done in JB Bickerstaff. Cade Cunningham is looking good. They have more shooting. Everyone's taking another leap. So I don't think that means they're going to fight for the play-in tournament, but it's just nice to see them taking steps in the right direction. I think that was what was so frustrating about them last season, is that they just were kind of taking a step back for reasons nobody could really figure out, despite all the young and intriguing talent they had on their roster. And how cooked are the Bucks? They seem pretty cooked, which feels kind of early to say because the season isn't even a month old. But the way I look at it is that everything with NBA teams starts at the top. It starts with your best players, superstar-driven league, all that stuff. And I think when the Bucks got Damian Lillard, they envisioned this incredible dynamic duo where, like, if nothing else, these two guys are gonna power us to wins, to be competitive, because at the offensive end, like, that duo of Giannis inside and Damian Lillard from the outside, like, that's just unstoppable. But it just hasn't been that. Wasn't that last year, and you kind of understood it because, like, okay, like, first year together was always rocky. Damian Lillard was going through some stuff off the court, tough adjustment, first year outside Portland. But this year you sort of hope, like, okay, things will start to mesh now, and they just haven't. They don't necessarily run so many plays together, which is always confusing because, hot take, I think you should run as many sets involving your two best players, or even three best players, however many, as possible. And so when you think of that, so when you think, like, okay, if the foundation of your team isn't where it needs to be, then I don't really know if anything else really matters. And that's what really alarmed me about the Bucks. Beyond the age, beyond the injuries, beyond the defense, beyond the Doc Rivers component, is just like these two guys who were supposed to be like the dynamic duo, the two engines to carry the Bucks. They're just not as cohesive as I think Milwaukee thought they would be when they made that trade. And if that's not going to change, then I don't know how the Bucks are going to change. So, bummer. Next question comes from Spangler.Ryan84. Do you think teams that we didn't expect to get off to a hot start, Golden State, Cleveland, Phoenix to some extent, are legit or products of their schedules? Do you think they're real contenders? Well, saying they're legit and saying they're real contenders I think are two different questions. But I do think, look at each of those teams and, like, I don't necessarily think it's a I don't think their success, their early season success, however unexpected it is, I don't think that's a product of schedule. I think if you look at all those teams, they all made fundamental changes to their teams. Warriors obviously added a few nice pieces like Buddy Hield, who's shooting the absolute lights out. I really like DeAnthony Melton. Jonathan Kuminga's a year older, a year better, all that stuff. You look at Cleveland, Kenny Atkinson's their new head coach, and I think he's working real wonders in terms of getting the most out of Evan Mobley, which was like one of the biggest question marks for Cleveland heading into the season. Phoenix added a legit point guard in Tyus Jones. You also have Monte Morris off the bench. And then you bring in Mike Budenholzer, who's one of the best offensive coaches in the NBA. Like, it's not like these three teams ran back their squad and now all of a sudden, like, things are changing and they're just playing better for no reason. Like, no, like, each team in the offseason made very legitimate, fundamental changes to their roster, to their coaching staff, and they're reaping the benefits. So does that mean they're legitimate contenders? I don't fully know. The season's not even, a couple weeks old, or I guess it's barely a couple weeks old. So, like, we'll definitely have to see how they look over the course of the season. But, like, I don't look at their success and think, like, whoa, how did this happen? Like, it's very clear how it happened. Like, they brought in new coaches. They brought in, like, much needed pieces. Like, it makes sense, right? Next question, Casual Basketball Police. Do we see any of these standout performers from the first few weeks, like R.J. Barrett, Cam Thomas, Dennis Schroeder, Ivica Zubac, etc., who can possibly establish this level of play as a regular thing going forward? Well, it's funny because there's sort of those names I think are funny as a list because I see a very clear divide. Like, you have RJ and Cam, who are two young, up-and-coming guys, and then you have Dennis Schroeder and Zubac, who I think are more established veterans. So I think in terms of, like, Schroeder and Zubac, like, I don't know, like, maybe. I mean, with Schroeder, like, I think it's more of a product of role and how he's, like, sort of the engine on this Nets team that just is kind of trying to lose games. So, like, can he keep this up? Yeah, but also, like, if he gets traded, then does he maybe go back to more of the role we've been grown accustomed to from him over the last few years? Zubac, I think it's a product of just, like, PG is obviously gone, Kawhi's hurt, and so it's just him and Harden spamming pick and rolls. And so if that's going to continue to be the case, even with Kawhi in and out of the lineup, then yeah, I don't know why I can't do that. I mean, Zubac has always been like an underrated double-double threat, but I think now he's getting more touches. And again, with James Harden really spoon-feeding him a lot on the pick and roll, like that's led to a lot of great shot opportunities. And so if that's going to continue, then yeah. And RJ and Cam, like, yeah, I'm not really surprised about either of those just because, like, they're young, up-and-coming guys who have clearly shown potential and talent over the years. Like RJ Barrett, I've always tried to be a big believer in as a Knicks fan. Like, he very clearly had talent, and I think we all really like what we saw out of him in Toronto last year after he got traded, where like you could see like, okay, like they're putting him in better positions to utilize his strengths as a downhill driver. He's made a playmaking leap so far this season. The shots, always I think in development, but I think it's looking good. And so like, yeah, like same thing with Cam Thomas. Like Cam Thomas has proven to be a legitimate bucket getter, and now with more opportunities in Brooklyn, like why can't all these guys continue? It's just like with those two guys in particular, with RJ and Cam, like it's just a product of age, like growing and developing, and then just getting the opportunity, and they're all taking advantage. So credit to them. Next question. This might be my favorite question of all of them. At Mujibamed1755. If Adam Silver came to you and needed you to solve the load management problem in the NBA, what would you do? This is my favorite question because it really has me thinking. I think there are two different ways you could go. The first way you can go with this question is the answer that everyone I think has been giving, which is like shorten the season. Shorten the season to 60-something games. But the reason I have a problem with this, or why I don't necessarily feel like it's a viable option, is because A, I don't think the owners are going to go for it. I don't think the owners are going to say, yeah, let's play fewer games and earn less money. Like, that's just not how it's going to happen. Same thing with the, TV deals that they just signed. And I also wonder if, players always talk about how, they definitely would play more if it was a 60-game season. My biggest fear is that, okay, let's say NBA stars play 70% of the 82-game season. My big fear, and that's just a made-up number. I don't even know if that's true or false or how close it is to the real thing, but I'm just making it up for this point. If they play 70% of the 82-game season, my big fear with shortening the season to 66 games or so is that they're not going to now start playing 100% of the 66-game season, but they're still going to play that 70% of whatever the season is. Like, they're still going to take off games. Obviously, injuries happen, and I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the load management. No more back-to-backs. Granted, in a 60-something game season, there wouldn't be as many back-to-backs, but that's just my fear. It's that the players are just going to continue to take as much as they can. So I don't necessarily feel like that's a viable option. Maybe I'm just being a pessimist. What I really lean towards is what I call the David Stern method. And the David Stern method, in this case, is just telling the players to suck it up and play. Like, David Stern really, he just did not care. And teams and players, they feared the hell out of him. Like, he could just tell someone to do something and they would do it because he really just had that kind of authority. And he did kind of rule with an iron fist. So if David Stern was like, guys, stop being weenies, playing more games, it's bad for business, guys would listen. Obviously, you can't necessarily do that with Adam Silver because Adam Silver is just not David Stern, and in some ways that's good, and in some ways that's bad. I don't think he has that same fear factor, but again, if I was asked what to do, it would try to be that. I think the pride that these players have to try and play in all 82 games, it's not there as much anymore. And on the one hand, I kind of understand it because we live in such a rings-obsessed championship or bust mentality that, at the end of the day, it's all about winning the championship, right? No one's going to care how many games you played during the regular season if you win the championship, if you bring home the championship, or if you fall short. That's what we as a fan culture have established as the only thing that matters. And so I don't think we should be surprised when teams and players act like that's the only thing that matters. And so I think if we want to change that, I think, this also, I guess, might just be a big answer. Let's change the way the NBA is talked about in the media. Let's get to the root of the problem, stop making everything about rings, and then maybe players would feel more inclined to care more about the journey of the 82-game season and just playing and performing and all that stuff. Maybe that's the answer. Just get everyone to care more about the regular season, and then maybe players would be more inclined to say, okay, I definitely want to win a championship, but I'm not going to get so clowned, and it's not going to be the be-all, end-all if I don't. And maybe that's the answer. I don't know. That's just one of the things that bothers me, and it's definitely why I feel like guys are sitting out more games, because they feel like the championship is just truly the only thing that matters. And in a sense, it is, because that's what you play the game for. But as Kobe Bryant said, part of the journey, the journey is the destination. The journey is the dream. And I think we need to get guys to care more about the journey and doing stuff over the course of an 82-game season. So I don't know. Last question at A Stars Court. What do you think can help the Nuggets? God, a time machine. I mean, Denver is sort of in a fundamental problem of they just don't have enough shooting. Like they give up KCP, who's one of the best 3-and-D guys, and I still don't really know why they do that. And you just see the way they play, like the math just isn't adding up. Like Aaron Gordon can't really shoot, Christian Brown can't really shoot, and then you play Russell Westbrook. Like that's 3 non-shooters, heavy non-shooters in your rotation, and that's just not good for spacing. That just doesn't work in today's NBA. In terms of trades, I don't really know what's out there and what they could possibly do with the assets that they have. But as far as like internally, Michael Porter Jr., he's been off to a rough start. He could start to shoot better because that's their best shooter in theory. Jamal Murray can play better. He's been dealing with a few knee issues. He could start to play better. Like having those 2 guys back, like having Jamal Murray as the Robin to Nikola Jokic's Batman, having him back to playing like he was, or even close to how he was, in the finals back in 2023, like that would just be massive because that 2-man game is usually so unstoppable. Granted, it's partially why it's been unstoppable is because the spacing was there with KCP and MPJ on the wings. But like I just think, like, again, sort of like what I said with the Bucks, like it starts at the top. It starts with your best players. And if Jamal Murray, the co-star, the running mate, the guy who just got a new extension, isn't going to play the way we've seen him play, the way that, was such a big part in helping the Nuggets win the championship 2 years ago, then it's just sort of like everything else just feels a little redundant to talk about. Like it's not that it doesn't matter, but it just doesn't feel as important, because if one of your best players isn't playing like it, then in a game like basketball, you're kind of screwed. So yeah.